Greetings, friends. Welcome to CTUCC ConferenceCast for January 31st, 2013, the regular podcast of the Connecticut Conference of the United Church of Christ. Whoever you are, and wherever you may be on life's journey at this very moment, you are welcome here. We begin this week's ConferenceCast with this reflection from your podcast host, Eric Anderson, Minister of Communications and Technology. I have two biblical texts on my mind this week. The first is the call of the prophet Jeremiah in the first chapter of his book, where God says, "Now I have put my words in your mouth." When the young man protests, he wouldn't know what to say. The second is the great hymn to love you'll find in the 13th chapter of Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. You may have heard these words before. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three. And the greatest of these is love. In my years as a local church pastor, I would offer couples planning their weddings the option to choose a biblical text, and this I would reflect on during their service. Some demurred, generally because they felt too unfamiliar with the scriptures to choose well. Of the rest, most leaped straight to these familiar words in 1 Corinthians. And as much as I enjoy the new and the creative and the different, I could only approve. Because though Paul does not speak here of romantic love, in fact, it's a completely different word in Greek, he does speak passionately of the love that makes a marriage. Love here is the deliberate decision to set another's interests at or above your own. Well, I must confess, Paul said it rather better than I just did. Now, the editors of the Revised Common Lectionary have, with something of sense of humor, paired Paul's hymn to love with Jeremiah's call to ministry. Jeremiah, whose talent for annoying people is as well documented as any person's in history. Jeremiah, whose fiery judgments against his nation came literally to the fire, burned by a furious monarch in a brazier. Jeremiah, whose response to this was to prepare an even more incendiary scroll. Jeremiah, whose words of comfort to those taken in exile to Babylon was to say, "Make your home there, because you're not returning here." Jeremiah, whose name in the English language has come to mean a list of complaints. But you know, we remember Jeremiah rather better than we do the king he offended. His name, by the way, was Jehoiakim. Jeremiah was, after all, trying desperately to help the nation he loved save itself from itself. I firmly believe that in these days God has given us words to speak. We are a rich nation with horrendous inequality of wealth. We are a nation others look to for security, but our citizens kill each other at appalling rates. We are a nation whose ideals of equal citizenship are a model for the world, but a casual glance betrays shocking inequities based on gender, skin tone, place of residence, and sexual orientation. Yes, we have words to speak, powerful words, I hope and pray. Let us speak them with love. Let us speak them setting others' interests at or above our own. It is desperately difficult to do. We like to rely on knowledge or on inspiration, but as Paul notes, these are incomplete. Love, though, can be complete. It requires thought, it requires research, ask, don't assume, and it requires a steady resolution to do what's good for another in full knowledge of the cost to ourselves. It requires openness, discernment, and strength. And as Paul notes, it gives all these things to us as well. No wonder we hear the idea again in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15, where he urges the readers to speak the truth in love. So let us speak, setting others' interests at or above our own. Here is a prayer for this week. Give us your words to speak, O God, to make ours a better community, a better state, a better nation, a better world. Give us also your grace to speak for others' interests, not our own. Help us speak the truth in love. Amen. Please hold in prayer today the family and friends of the Reverend Gregory G. Kendall, Pastor Emeritus of the First Congregational Church CTUCC of Andover. In 50 years of ordained ministry, he served churches in Connecticut, Vermont, and Massachusetts. He died on January 16th at the age of 79. In the news this week, on Martin Luther King Day, worshipers from all over central and northeastern Connecticut came to Faith Congregational Church UCC in Hartford for the annual celebration of the civil rights and spiritual leader, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. For the day's topic, organizers chose the one on everyone's mind since last December: gun violence. Echoing Dr. King, they declared that we must face it to fix it. The Reverend Dr. Valerie Bridgman, Associate Professor of Hebrew Bible, Homiletics, and Worship at Lancaster Seminary in Pennsylvania, was the preacher for the day.
Gun violence is a scourge on our land, and it is a pestilence, a sickness that reflects a broken community and a disenfranchised hope. People don't kill folk when they really are in community.
She told a story from when she served a church in Memphis, Tennessee, and opened her home to visits from the city's young people, many of them caught up in gangs and violence. Her house was known as a no-beef zone, with no weapons allowed, and they trusted her. One day, she was introduced to a young man with the invitation to tell him something prophetical. And after listening to him, she simply said, "Don't get dead." Later, she heard that her words had made a difference. When someone else reported that for the first time anyone could think of, that young man had walked away from a fight because he said Dr. Valerie had told him, "Don't get dead."
I thought to myself in that moment, and we say we can't make a difference one person at a time. Who knows what the ripple effect would have been had he decided not to hear the whisper of God in his ear that said, "Don't get dead."
Other speakers for the day included civic and community leaders. Faith Church member Devon Pollard, noting that there are already too many guns available, urged equipping the young men of the city with tools they can turn to other than guns.
What we can control are the people who get exposed to them. We have to teach them how to communicate, teach them how to express themselves. If not, they're going to hold that anger in. When they're faced with a situation, they're going to reach for something. And 9 times out of 10, somebody's going to be hurt.
The annual King Celebration service is the work of Faith Church, Amistad UCC in Hartford, and the Connecticut Conference. On Sunday the 20th, members of the United Congregational Church UCC in Tolland welcomed Catherine Kane, Executive Director of the Harriet Beecher Stowe Center in Hartford, for their annual observance of the Martin Luther King Jr. Peace and Justice Brunch. Kane spoke of the correspondence between Stowe, author of Uncle Tom's Cabin, a galvanizing work for those advocating the abolition of slavery in the 19th century, and her sister Isabella. In those letters, Stowe spoke of her meeting President Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War, revealing him to be a thoughtful man who listened and cared deeply. Kane said, "These very human people that went before us, who aren't that much different from us, remind us that we too can stand up and make a difference, and that it's our jobs to do that as human beings fully engaged in our world." Though Lent has not yet begun, we're looking ahead to the 50 days after Easter, when the United Church of Christ's Mission for One Earth initiative has called churches and people around the country to 3 bold, inspirational goals: 1 million hours of service on earth-friendly projects, 100,000 letters to public officials and the media, and planting 100,000 new trees. The first of a series of stories with tips and ideas is on our website now, focused on the planting of those trees. The UCC has entered a partnership with the National Arbor Day Foundation, permitting members to make financial contributions that will aid specific reforestation projects. Patsy Bjorling also suggests working with local schools or municipal agencies to find appropriate settings for new trees, and she provides some additional resources for finding them. Check out our website for more on this topic, for all these stories, and the current headlines at ctucc.org/news.
As the sun finally shines a little longer this spring, imagine your bare feet greeting the warm sand between your toes.
Imagine the fireflies sparkling along the tree line above the campfire.
Hear the singing floating over the hill from the Waterfall Chapel.
Revel in the delight of discovering a new best friend in the bunk above you.
In your imagination, you're at Silver Lake already for a week-long outdoor ministry experience that changes lives and makes friend-making easy.
Greet God in God's backyard at Silver Lake this summer. Learn more and register at www.silverlakect.org.
God is working through all the people who fill our lives with hope and care and grace.
There's still room to register, but hurry, we're filling up.
We look forward to welcoming you to Silver Lake, your conference center.
Back, watching the firefly.
Registration for Silver Lake Summer Conferences is now open. To learn more and register, visit us at silverlakect.org. Advanced Intentional Intra-Ministry Training will be held in Framingham, Massachusetts, February 4th through 8th. CT Women of the UCC are planning a Lenten Day away for clergy women on February 5th. Anti-apartheid activist Alan Bisak will speak at the Dixwell Church in New Haven on February 7th. And the UCC's Peter McCarry will discuss the current situation in Israel and Palestine in Worcester, Massachusetts on February 10th. The March for Change rally against gun violence is at the state capitol in Hartford on February 14th. The Stepping Stones workshop Rhythms of Grace will be held in Southington on February 27th. Save the date March 9th now for Leadership Matters, a day-long educational event for pastors, educators, and all church leaders. The event, the successor to last year's March in the Sun, will be in South Glastonbury. We hope to open registration next week. Registration is now open for the Northeast Ecumenical Stewardship Council's annual 2-day event titled Liberating Generosity, featuring Michael Piazza, running March 15th and 16th in Boxborough, Massachusetts. And you can also register your 6th, 7th, and 8th grader for Silver Lake's Maple Sugaring Weekend, running March 22nd through the 24th. You can always learn about what's coming up in the Connecticut Conference by visiting us at ctucc.org/events. And that brings this ConferenceCast to a close. Thanks to you for listening and to GarageBand for our music. Primary funding for ConferenceCast comes from your congregation's gifts to our church's wider mission, basic support, changing lives through the United Church of Christ. This is Eric Anderson, the Minister of Communications and Technology for the Connecticut Conference of the United Church of Christ, praying that your days this week may be filled with the presence, the guidance, and the grace of God.